Today's topic is bill of material management. Okay, so I'm just going to order this because I'm going to bring up my preview pane so we can see all of the topics that we're going to cover today. So I've created this as a project, as you can see here, and what I've done on the Actions tab is I've created a task for each of the topics that we're going to cover. We're going to cover administration for part attributes, bill of material attributes, BOM options for SolidWorks and Solid Edge. There are some specific options for that. Bill of materials that can be mixed CAD or non-CAD. Reports on a bill of materials, whether they're Excel, CSV or PDF. Position numbers in a BOM, quantity options, BOM link attributes, which we would define at the second step here. Okay. Saving the user interface settings for bill of materials, view hidden items, view multi-level, view bill of quantity, view BOM comparison. I've got a little error in there, I should do that. Okay, and there's a new option on the viewing, which is view latest issues. This enhancement that I am going to show you is available in the 2024.12 public release that will be available anytime now. There are a couple of enhancements that are in place in our development system that I'd like to cover. One of them is color coding the header rows inside the BOM editor. Having the ability to edit BOM level attributes outside of the normal access controls, or having an additional access control, so it will make more sense later when I explain. The ability to have roll-up costs in a bill of materials, replace with alternatives or variants, and ERP interface. So they are the topics that we're going to cover today, and I'd like to begin by covering the administration of part attributes. So if I go into the DDM administration client, okay, let's just full screen that. So I assume that we are all familiar with part and assembly attributes, drawing attributes and document attributes. So DDM is delivered with a lot of standard attributes, and you can add your own custom attributes. I've got a couple of examples here. I've added additional attributes here for ROSH compliance. So is the part compliant? Yes, no. As of what date? Are there any exceptions, and what was the source of compliance? So just examples of how you can extend DDM as part attributes. We've got a links down at the bottom. So in attributes, it says down here links. Now we are in the process of migrating this functionality into the new admin tool, and when we bring it into the new admin tool, we will split it so that there is a specific tab for bill of material attributes and a specific tab for folder link attributes. Okay, so this will look slightly different in the future. We're going to focus on the bill of material attributes today. If I double click on here to go into edit mode, we have a set of bill of material attributes. The defaults are things like CAD quantity, total quantity, real quantity, spares quantity. So these are default when you install DDM. I've added some additional BOM level attributes such as serial number, service BOM, reference designator, purchase status. So you can extend by adding your own attributes that are BOM link level attributes. We're going to see that a bit later inside the BOM editor window to understand how they work. Okay, sorry, I need to cancel. So cancel out of that. So creating BOM link attributes is a separate area to your normal part and assembly attributes. I'm just going to hop back to the main administration tool. Okay, so in here, I'm going to say that we've discussed part attributes in the administration tool, and we've discussed BOM attributes in the administration tool. There are a couple of additional areas in the administration tool related to bills of materials coming from SolidWorks and Solid Edge. If I go back into the administration tool under CAD and neutral files, under settings, for SolidWorks, there are three options here as to whether you want to include suppressed components in a bill of materials, hidden components, or envelope components in a bill of materials. Likewise, we have similar options. Interesting. Maybe I chose the wrong one. Now that's thrown me ever so slightly, because while I was looking at this, we had a load of options in here for the same. Okay, I'm going to move on. So let's just say for SolidWorks, there are some additional bill of material options there as to whether you want things included in the bill of materials when saving from the CAD application. Okay, so a bill of materials can be CAD or non-CAD based, or can be a mix of the two. If I've got if I look in the structure of this particular folder, okay, I've got an assembly here, which is what I'm going to use to demonstrate. I'll just right click and open the bill of materials for this assembly. Now what we can see here is this is a Creo CAD assembly, and we've got 3 Creo parts in this assembly, but we also have a non-CAD part, which is our Loctite. So this has a generic icon, not a CAD-based file icon. And if I look at the properties for our Loctite, then that is basically just, sorry, I'm just going to size that window. This is just a part that we have created and registered in the DDM database, because you don't model Loctite, okay? The other example of non-modeled that I have in here is that I have a PCB. So this is a non-CAD PCB, although one of the components within it has a CAD model. All of the other electrical components within this structure are just generic items. Okay. So, CAD or non-CAD, it could be pure CAD, pure non-CAD, or a mix of the two. Okay. So let me go back to my action list. CAD or non-CAD, complete. So, reports on a bill of materials, Excel, CSV, or PDF. There are actually a couple more options than that. So I'm inside my bill of material window. What the options I've got here is save the results of what's displayed on the screen, save everything to CSV, everything to Excel, or as displayed to CSV or Excel. If I just push this out to an Excel file, it literally takes the information that it sees on the screen and it shows me in an Excel spreadsheet. You'll notice the first column here is the index. Because this is a multi-level bill of materials, we see level 1, 1.1, 1.2, 1.3, 1.4. Our PCB assembly is an assembly, it's an assembly, therefore we've got 1.4.1.2.3, etc. So that's what this structure is in the first column. Also, the columns that are displayed in this Excel spreadsheet are based on the columns that we are displaying inside the bill of material editor. You can see here that I've got a column for reference designator, which is the positional information for the components that appear on that PCB. Okay, so that's sending to Excel. I'm not going to save that. We can do the same by sending it out to CSV. What we also have the option of doing is running a report on this assembly, which could be multi-level, flat quantity, etc. There's a few different options, single level bomb. If I just say multi-level bill of materials, in here you've got the option to choose whether you want the output in a PDF, a Word document, Excel, XML, or XLS only. I'm going to choose PDF. If I want to, I can have the report emailed to me as opposed to opening it on the screen. Include hidden items, include latest issues. So these I will explain a little bit more as to what they mean, but basically you can turn these on and off in your report. So if I now say, okay, give me a PDF report of my bill of materials, let's just wait for it to run this. Okay, it's asked me where I want to save it, and then it will open my bill of materials report. Now this is a very generic thing. It's generated by a tool called Crystal Reports, which is a database report generation tool. This is just our default example. You can take our default and you can put your own logos on, your own columns, or however you want to modify it. You will require a copy of Crystal Reports to do that, but you can build your own reports and register them to the DDM database. This is just our default example. Okay, so let's hop back to the main window. So reporting on bills and materials, and let's say complete. I can actually do this in the web as well. I should kick off the web client in the background. Okay, let me just set that running in the background. So the next thing to talk about with bills and materials is position number. If I go back to my bill of materials, the first column in here is for position number. So if I was to select all, I believe I can select all and clear them out here. So you can either manually set position number. Now all the position number does is it determines the default sort order of the bill of materials in this window. Otherwise you'd be doing it by part number, and that isn't necessarily how people want to see their bill of materials structure. So it's quite common for businesses to say, well, I want the main item to be at the top. You might want this second and this displayed third. I want the PCB at position 50 and the Loctite at position 40. So I can choose a different display order. If I apply the changes, it's now moved those into the display order that I require. So position number. Okay, quite simple. If I clear these, auto number clear. You could also auto number set. So I could say, well, start at 100 and go up in tens. So if you've got a big bill of materials that you want to just apply position numbers, you can do this as well. Okay, so position number, pretty simple and straightforward, but that's what that column is for. Complete. Quantity options. Now, as I said earlier, the default quantity options are configured out of the box against the attribute, against the link attributes. I'm just going to hop back in this tool, and while I do that, I will bring the web client into play. I'm going to log in here, and if, for example, I search for the same assembly 6723, if I search the web client, I'm looking for a part 6723. Okay. Okay, I've got a couple of different states in here. I'm going to say only show me the latest issue. So here is the assembly that we're looking at. If I'm looking at this assembly in the web client, then I have a bill of material option tab in here in the structure. So this is the bill of materials. We're showing this as data cards at the moment, and we can see here the position number and the quantity. You also have the option of displaying this in a table as well. Okay, so we were talking about position number, and position number we moved on to bill of material quantities attributes. So in bill of materials we've got CAD quantity, total quantity, real quantity and spares quantity. So they exist out of the box in DDM. So if we go into our bill of materials here, we've got the CAD quantity, the real quantity, the spare quantity, and therefore the total quantity. Now we see here that in our design we've got one housing in CAD. There are 2 roller bearings and that real quantity can be adjusted. Okay, if I go to the, for example, if we're showing 2 but the real quantity can actually be 4, because sometimes in CAD you don't necessarily represent every instance of every item in a full structure. You might only represent enough to display on a drawing for manufacturing purposes, but from a bill of materials standpoint you want the quantities to be correct and accurate. So the ability to override what is generated automatically by your CAD save and the ability to put in a real quantity. Okay, so the real quantity is the override on the CAD quantity. As we can see for the Loctite, there is 0 CAD quantity and the real quantity is 0.25, and I can manually, so if I say 1.25 of whatever its unit of measure each, which in this case is each, that wouldn't be each for an adhesive, but you get the idea. What you can also do is, let's say if we provide 4 roller bearings, you can also apply a spares quantity, and therefore the total quantity on this bill of materials is 5. So these are the default quantity attributes for a bill of materials in DDM. Let me hop back here. So quantity options, that's what they are for. Next is BOM link attributes. Now it gets a little bit more interesting because, as I showed earlier, we have a custom BOM link attribute called reference designator. So this is one that I created manually. It's a free text field. It contains text. It's 254 characters long and it has a display order of 1. Okay. Now in my bill of materials I can turn that attribute on or off. So in the window on the column header you can choose which part attributes you want displaying and which BOM attributes you want displaying. So let's pick on the part attributes because I've got a couple of other attributes. We might want to know the manufacturing type. So I've turned on an additional one here because, you know, we might want to keep track as to whether something is purchased, machined, sheet metal, you know, whatever. It's quite common for businesses to want to have additional attributes like this against parts so that you can sort and identify, etc. So the difference between your part attributes and the BOM attributes. As you can see here, I've got reference designator turned on. Real simple. If I turn it off, it disappears. If I go back in again and turn it back on, it appears at the end. I'm going to switch off the manufacturing type there. And here what I've got is my reference designator that I'm bringing back over to this position. Okay, reference designator, again as we saw earlier, is the attribute that we use that tells you the position of this component on this assembly. So it must be a BOM level attribute because it's related to the component's position on its parent assembly. It's not an attribute against the part itself. So understanding the difference between part attributes and BOM attributes is pretty important because they're very useful. Okay. Another example of a part link attribute is the notes attribute. So here we can apply a note to the Loctite that is only related to this assembly at issue 7. And I'm using the note to explain to whoever is manufacturing or assembling or producing this item to say only apply the Loctite to the bearing housing during, you know, during assembly or whatever. So the ability to add this additional information over and above your normal BOM information. Another one that can be common is I've got one here that's called purchase status. This is not a standard DDM attribute, but I added it because I was asked the question by a business that don't run ERP. So if you're a business that doesn't have an ERP system and you might want to track against your project what we've purchased and what we haven't purchased, I've added a column here so that I'm in a position where I could say, to be ordered, or this has been ordered, maybe this has been fully delivered, and maybe this has been part delivered. So just to give us an understanding of that kind of information against a bill of materials if you don't run an ERP system. And it's quite common these days. Bigger manufacturing companies typically always have ERP, and you would do that in an ERP system. But for people who don't, it can be quite useful. Okay, so the difference between part and BOM level attributes, they can be really quite useful. Effectivity dates, effective from, effective to, cut length. You might have an item on there that's a raw material, but you want to specify the cut length. There's lots of examples where you might want to use those things. Okay, BOM link attributes. Let's say we've talked about those. Saving the UI settings. If you change the layout of your bill of material columns, etc., then when you exit the BOM window and you do a full exit of DDM. Now it's important that DDM is fully logged out at that point. So I can check DDM is not running in the background, I've definitely logged out, and therefore it has saved my settings. I'm going to log back in again, so that when I log back in, all of my layout settings are there. Now in the latest version of DDM, we also have the ability, if I return to the main admin tool, we also have the ability that if I'm logged in as myself, where am I? Stuart McBurney, okay? I can take a copy of my UI profile, my settings inside the DDM Office client. Okay, if you want all of your users to be seeing the same information laid out on the same screens, you can do this by logging in as a particular user, choose all of your options and your settings, and then copy and paste them onto other users. What I would recommend there is creating a sample user if you don't already have one. So if you log in as a sample user and create yourself default settings, what it means is if you're not using that account under normal conditions, you're not running the risk of changing your defaults. So it's just a nice little way of setting some standards. Now it could be that for different people within the business, you want them to see different layout within the DDM environment. So you could create a default user for engineering, or a default user for manufacturing, or a default user for sales, etc. So, once you understand the mechanism, have a good think about how you logically want to go about that. Okay, so, and the other thing to note there is if I copy UI settings, I can either select individual users, or I could go to groups and I could apply and paste those settings on an entire group, or if I wanted to, I could say I want to apply this to all groups. Okay, a quick note on that, and it does warn you when you do it, is if you're pasting settings onto users or groups, you should make sure those people are already logged out. Because if you paste your settings and they're still logged in, when they exit DDM, it will overwrite those settings, and therefore they've overwritten what you've done for them. So if you're going to do that kind of thing, make sure everybody's logged out. Otherwise, you'll trip over yourself. Okay, saving the UI settings. We go back to the workshops, back to today's workshop, and back to our tasks. Okay, so saving the UI settings. Complete. So view options, viewing hidden items. So if we go back to our assembly, it'll be in my recent items. Okay. And this is the assembly that we're playing with. Okay. So I'm just going to reset my view back here to what I was looking for. I should have just opened it in its own window, but never mind, we're here. Okay, so view hidden items. What does that mean? Well, it's quite common that you might have an assembly in your product structure and the supplier might have sent you that as an assembly. Okay, but in your BOM, you want to see that as a single item. So you do have the ability of saying, well, let's take the example of this PCB. At the moment, this PCB is a full assembly of parts. If I open this in its own BOM, because it is its own bill of materials, so if I open the bill of materials for this PCB, I can select some or all of the items within that assembly, okay, and I can hide them. So I can say these are hidden, or maybe only some of them are hidden. So let's say if we go up to number 10, then we know that we only have 10 visible items in that bill of materials. So if I hide all of those, you'll see there's a column here that says hidden. All of these are yes, hidden. Okay, if I apply the changes, then if I say in my view option down here, so there is a hidden items option here. So if I don't want to see the hidden items, I can turn them off. Okay, so all of these mechanisms, because businesses have all weird and wonderful ways that they want to construct bills of materials and view bills of materials. So the ability to hide and unhide items on a BOM, and therefore, if I OK this and go back to my master bill of materials, okay, oh, I've closed both of them, apologies. If I go back to my recent items here, and I reopen this bill of materials, then in here, I'm showing all hidden items. If I do that, I'm now only showing the unhidden items. So the ability to hide and unhide items in bills of materials. Okay. Another example is it might be a welded assembly, but you might want to recognize it as an individual part on the BOM. So there's lots of reasons for this stuff. If you have a requirement for it, you will understand what I'm doing there. Okay, let's go back to our workshop. The ability to hide and unhide items on a bill of materials. I've thought of another example. It might be that in your CAD environment, you have things within your CAD structure that you're using to define a CAD structure, but that are not part of the bill of materials. So you could either do that at a DDM level or do it at a CAD level by saying hide or suppress, which is what the options were in the admin tool earlier, being able to turn things on and off for the CAD tools. View multi-level or not, pretty self-explanatory. You can have multi-level turned on or off. So if I just turn it off, it literally means we see this as a single structure, like that. Or we can go multi-level, which then allows us to say expand all. We want to see hidden items, I say expand all. So this will show you your full structure. So quite often it's a combination of these view options to see what you need to see. Okay. Multi-level on or off. Bill of quantity. Okay, well, if I go back to our sample assembly, we can see that this part 404, there are 4 of these. No, sorry, that's the issue. I've not got any quantities in here. Okay, let me edit this bill of materials again. And if I say, well, the real quantity of the first item, well, this D18, let me say the real quantity of that is 10. Okay, so I'm going to OK that. Now, in our top level here, we can see that that item has a quantity of 10. Well, if our PCB has a real quantity of, let's say, 5, if I do a bill of quantity, okay, save my changes, then what we should see here is this item from our electrical bomb has a quantity of 50 because it's 5 times 10. So bill of quantity will tell you how many items there are across the entire structure, because all we're doing here is showing one unique line, or one line per unique item. Okay, some people use this as like a kitting list or a shopping list as well. So you can see, well, how many do I need across the entire assembly? So bill of quantity is what we call it. Some people call this summary of parts. So it's the ability to flatten the structure and show total quantity across the structure. You also have an option with bill of quantity, which is assemblies. Because if an assembly, for example, the PCB, is only the part that it's made up from, you might not want to show the assemblies, and therefore these are the individual parts required for this entire structure. So again, they're just visibility and display options. Okay, bill of quantity. Complete. The next one is BOM comparison. Okay, and what we can do here is we can either run a comparison. This assembly is currently at issue 7. You can do a BOM comparison across the same assembly, across different issues of the same assembly. So between issue 6 and issue 7, what we can see here now is where the changes. So we show what's changed. Now we can see here that the previous quantity was 0.25, but on this version it's 1.25. So what we show in red is the old issue, or the one we're comparing it with. Okay, and we have a column here that says BOM comparison column. Okay, and we've put the words in to try and explain what the change is. If I just move this over, so what we're saying is this line is different in issue 7. If, for example, I turn that off, and let's say I remove the Loctite from this particular bill of materials, if I was then to run a BOM comparison between 6 and 7, what we now have is it's telling us that the Loctite does not exist in issue 7, but it did exist in issue 6. So this BOM comparison column is really quite useful for identifying things like that. I'm going to come out of here because I have another example. No, I'll leave it there. Okay, so that particular assembly, again, I'm going to hop to my recent items, reopen the assembly because this is the one we're looking at, and I will hop back to DDM and back into my workshop tasks. Okay, so BOM comparison, the ability to compare across different issues of the same bill of materials or different issues of different bills of materials. You can only compare 2, you cannot go beyond that. Okay, so BOM comparison. Okay, this next one, view latest issues, is something that's available in the 2024.12 version. And what this is, most businesses in their ERP or MRP system display latest issue by default. So they assume latest issue, and most people don't put part history turned on in an MRP or an ERP system because it becomes incredibly complex to manage. Okay, we had a request for a business that they want to keep the absolute tracking and the audit trail of versions of all of their information, but what they wanted was the ability in a bill of materials to be able to say, now this is not a great example because there isn't anything in here that isn't the latest issue. Okay, but for example, I'm going to hop back to DDM and I'm going to go to parts purchased adhesives. Okay, now this is it's a silly example. Oh no, I'll do this in a different way. I'm going to go in and find a manufactured part, mechanical, let's say a housing, standard housings, but I'm going to switch on all issues so I can see something that is an old issue. So let's just say, for example, if I have this part, I'm going to copy this, I'm going to add it to my bill of materials. We can see here that it's superseded. It is not the latest issue. So it's an alternative housing, so I'll position that at 110 and apply the changes. So what we've now got is we've got a part on our bill of materials that was correct as of issue 7, but is now subsequently not the latest issue. Okay. The new enhancement is a button that says, I want to see the latest of everything within my, so you could say expand all, latest issues, and now we will see the latest issue of every item in the bill of materials, including this inventor part that was at issue 7. So the ability to force the viewing of the latest issue of everything within a bill of materials. Okay, that should also work. So if I come out of that view and go to my bill of quantity, if I order by state, again we can see this out of date inventor part, but if I switch latest issue on, then I'm not seeing that anymore. Here it is showing me the latest issue 10. So this enhancement is for users to be able to say, show me the latest issue of everything, regardless of what the issue was at the point in time that you finished a part assembly, etc., and released it. Okay, that also applies in the web client. So if I go back to here and I do that, we can also see in here I've added this additional housing that's superseded through the web client, and I also have an option now of saying show latest issue, and therefore it's now showing me issue 10 and not issue 7. So whether it's through the DDM Office client or whether it's through the DDM web client, the ability for a user to say, show me what the latest issue is. Okay, and it's quite common for people who don't have MRP or ERP to be able to want to see that for people in purchasing or people in manufacturing, etc. Okay, let's go back to our workshop. View latest issue, this one here. Okay, now the next 4 topics that, well, actually I'm going to do ERP interface first. Okay, bidirectional ERP interface, we have covered it under other workshops, but the ability to be able to say, well, okay, I could send this information out to my ERP system. There are specific videos to show you all of the various options on how you can achieve that, but what we can do is, if I go back to the main DDM interface and I'm looking at my recent items, here what I have is an assembly, and we can send that information to what we call our Enterprise Update Manager, and that would send the information to ERP. Or we could send the information when we change the status of the assembly from work in progress to released. So the basic explanation for that is, if I bring my DDM server into the main window, I have a setting inside the DDM admin tool. Okay, well, I'll just do it from here. So if I go to System, ERP Export, when an assembly reaches a status of released, I want to send the information out for the ERP system to receive. You can also have manual sending of that information as well. Okay, so it is covered in more detail in one of the other workshop videos, so if you want more information on that, please ask Sandra. EUM output. Well, what I'm going to do here is just delete these examples. So if we demonstrate, if I have this assembly and I want to say send to enterprise, that's now put it in a queue. Now we'll see here that the date on this part says 244. Okay, and that was the last time EUM was updated. Now the reason why this has been happening a lot today is because every time I edit that bill of materials, we're resending the updates to the ERP system every time to make sure that we've got them in sync. What happens on the server is we will get an XML file delivered to this location, which is what the ERP system will be monitoring and looking for. And this XML file, if I open it, contains every attribute required to rebuild the bill of materials. Okay, so if I say view fold all, inside this file we've got the bill of material information, every item that appears on the bill of materials, and we can dig in. All of the information required to reconstruct a bill of materials in a different database is included within this XML file. Okay, and then when it's been processed, it removes them from this location. So there's a separate video on that. If you do want more information on the ability to interface with an MRP or ERP system, please can you message Sandra and we will get back to you. Okay, so let's hop back to our topic again, bill of material, go back to our action list. So we've talked about ERP interface. Now, these 4 topics are really just discussions to explain some of the enhancements that have been requested. What I'm going to do is explain them first, and then we'll stop the video and we can take questions or get comments as to whether people think they're good ideas. The first enhancement is to color code the header row. It's a simple thing, but when you're in a bill of materials, I think it would be useful if the header row is color-coded to indicate if an attribute is a part level attribute or a BOM level attribute. So you would only see 2 colors, but it becomes immediately clear as to what you're looking at. Okay, that's the first enhancement. Okay, the next one we will talk about is the ability to have access control on the link attributes. Okay, now if we go into our bill of materials, if this, well, let's pick on, what are we in? We're in bill of quantity. If this part is released, okay, well, if the assembly is also released, then we cannot modify any of the other link level attributes. So all of these attributes get locked when the assembly gets locked. Well, it might be that from an engineering standpoint, you might want to release the entire structure, but you might want to be able to modify the BOM level attributes by a different group of people. So one scenario could be that engineering have released the assembly, therefore locked it down. You cannot change that. But a purchasing department or a production department might want to be able to edit the BOM link attributes even though it's been released. It's becoming a common request. We deal with lots of startup companies and companies that haven't necessarily got an MRP system or very project based. These attributes for purchase status. The trouble is, if we release this whole assembly, we can no longer modify these purchase attributes to understand where we are in the process. So it's basically adding another access control if I go to Access Controls, for Parts, Documents and Drawings, if I open this, at the moment we've got the standard Access Control selection. What I think we would do is we will add a ACL selection bill of materials, because you might allow a different group of people to modify those attributes at a different status. Okay, I'm hoping that made sense. We can talk about it openly when we finished. So let's just set these as in progress, so we know that we are still got these open. The next one is BOM roll-up costs. The ability to be able to assign, for example, cost to a part. If I've got in here price, retail price, cost, discount, margin, whatever the attribute is, if we just say what is the retail price, okay, well, if we know what the price is and we know what the quantity is, should we be able to roll up the cost against the assembly to see what the total cost is? So we've been asked for it a number of times. It can get quite complex. So if we deliver this, we're going to deliver it in a pretty simplistic way, certainly to begin with. But the ability to have, just give me a roll-up cost here. Whether you have ERP or not, you might still be interested in just saying, give me a cost. Okay. So that's the next enhancement to discuss. And then the final one is related to part alternatives and variants. If you have parts in your database, let's just say, if I go into here and say, show me latest issue. If I look at this particular part, imagine if we have a tab against the part that says these are alternatives to this part. A good example is a memory SIM for a computer. You might have an 8 gig SIM, a 16 gig SIM, a 32, a 64. Well, they're all typically interchangeable parts with each other, so that the form and the fit are the same, but the function is different, but they are interchangeable. So to be able to build the relationships between parts, to say, well, I want the black one and not the white one, or the red one or the blue one, you know, you'd be able to have this level of control. And what you would also have is, if you have a relationship, you would have a link attribute that says, well, what is the relationship? Is it an alternative? Is it interchangeable? Because there's different ways that this can be defined. Okay, what that means to a bill of materials is, you might be in a bill of materials and there might be an option that says, swap it out for this. I want to exchange this part, so I don't want the 8 gig SIM, I want the 16 gig SIM. Because if you've defined that relationship against the part, we would look at building that interchangeability at a bill of material level as well. And again, that's where those access controls come into play. So getting very much into the PLM product configuration side of things here. Hoping that made sense. Okay, I am going to remove this because it doesn't belong in this bill of materials. Apply the changes. I'm going to set my real quantity back to clear that. Clear that. I'm going to remove that. I'm going to turn off the retail price there, and I will go back to my DDM because I want to go back to my Loctite. Hold on. Purchased adhesives, Loctite. I want to copy that, paste it into the bill of materials, put it at line 150, and the real quantity is 1.25 of its unit of measure. So I've updated my bill of materials. Okay, let me get back to my workshop topics. Okay, so they are all the topics that I wanted to cover today. Okay. Thank you all for attending